Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit Pro Revenge stories. Imagine thinking you can bully the quiet new guy without consequences. My supervisor boss spent 3 months tormenting me, but he made one fatal mistake. He fell asleep while I was driving. And in the second title story, right after the first one, my crazy neighbor sold the house I inherited from my dead parents before I could even move in. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a fantastic pro revenge story that is titled "I Got Revenge on My Workplace Bully," posted by user estacask on r/pro-revenge on Reddit. When I was a young man of just 18, I got a job in a Canadian oil patch. It was my first real job, it was the early 2000s, and this paid $20 an hour with no experience or education required. The minimum wage was sub $6. What I did was called well testing. Basically, you hook up a closed pressure tank and flare stack to new oil and gas wells and then flow them, gather data for the oil barons. It is hard work setting it up and tearing it down, but the rest is recording gauges and computer work. So yeah, not bad for a first job, except for ducking Gary. You work 2-man 12-hour or 4-man 24-hour crews, 1 laborer, 1 supervisor, a shift. I was paired with a mean-spirited alcoholic in his mid-50s named Gary. He was overweight and lazy, only helping with things too heavy to lift on my own, like 250-pound pipes. He spent his days in the trailer for the most part anyway, watching DVDs, napping, and hourly typing a bit of data into a PC. He also liked picking on me with so-called jokes, meaning insults. I'm not a small man, about 6'1" in heels. He was noticeably smaller, yet while not physically intimidating, back then I lacked confidence and got a baby face. I got called stupid a lot, and when he found out I'd never used a power drill, he asked me, "Didn't your dad teach you anything?" Well, I made the error of telling him that my dad was only in my life a handful of years. The next time I made a mistake, he quipped, "No wonder my dad walked out on me." I did call him out on that, like every other a-hole alive. He would tell me I couldn't take a joke. We always worked far out of town in the country. I often had to eat dinner with him in small-town restaurants, mostly bars if we could help it. He drank a lot, could actually be personable when not at work, and he was at least too deep. He didn't stop and drank every night. It quickly became the case that I drove us to work in his truck. He made $1 or $1.10 per kilometer, and we could drive like 100 to 350 kilometers per day every day for weeks. 100 miles equals 160 kilometers, by the way. I got minimum wage for travel time, and he was hungover most mornings. He didn't want to drive and told me that he was boss. He slept like a gin-bloated corpse until we got to work. I worked with him for 3 months. 3 months of demeaning treatment and verbal abuse. I don't react much, it is still true, everyone has their breaking point though. I was very used to bullying by then. Long story, I just get silent. I also needed the job though. I don't anything until I do, and I don't do nothing forever. Part 1. The power of love. The first step in my quest for vengeance was remembering that it's impossible to defeat evil with the power of love. Part number 2. The power of terror. One night, while we were out of town on a job during dinner, I mentioned to Gary, it's pretty lame that he sleeps most of the time while I drive his truck and he gets paid. Maybe he ought to kick a few bucks my way for the effort. He didn't like my suggestion. He be generous. The last hinge must have crumbled because he became unglued. More verbal abuse, and I was young. It actually reduced me to angry tears. When he threatened my job, it was a bad feeling, so I resolved to at least get away from him. I'd been taking notes because I wanted a different crew anyway, and my breaking point was achieved. This is usually when my instinct for self-preservation diminishes and impulsive thoughts have fewer safeguards. I wanted to go home, not revenge but serendipity delivered the next morning. Gary was once again in his travel coma, and I drove us to work. About 30 kilometers from the side of the highway on a pullout was a semi-truck. Luck would also have it that it was running and the trucker was outside his rig. I quickly formulated a plan. So Gary always needed to be woken up with intent so he didn't stir. When I stopped, got out and asked the friendly driver for a favor. Trucker man agreed to my terms, got back in his semi to await the signal. Gary, blissfully sleeping off the last of his nightly whiskey, also failed to notice when I maneuvered his truck. Parking it, we were nearly bumper to bumper, facing the big beautiful Peterbilt. I lit the beacon. The truckers of Rohan answered with their own headlights. Like the horn of Helm Hammerhand sounding in the deep, the trucker hit his air horn with amazing commitment to instilling fear. I did my part by honking Gary's truck gleefully in respite and screaming my butt off. I cried bloody murder at blast level and yelled, "Damn, we're gonna die!" Striking like a battalion of bombers singing a chorus of fire, the glorious cacophony lasted less than a minute, and when it hit him, Gary dented the ceiling. Good thing he is thick as cement, or that might have hurt him. He rocketed up with such force because the amount of crap he rapidly expelled into his pants kept him in debt to his own bowels until retirement. The wonderful sound of his anguished howls sagged quickly into apoplexy and rage. While coming to terms with what I had done, he couldn't correctly choke out his death threats. I reversed, peeled off before he decided to get out to make good, and gave the trucker a wave. I got about 10 meters down the road when Gary felt the need to tell me he had dangerously high blood pressure and I could have killed him with a stroke. About 4 years later, I went to paramedic school, so yeah, in hindsight, I agree with his assessment. Sucks for him at 18, I had legitimately no idea what a stroke was. What would I even do? Probably ignore him like that it was Stalin. I would think he was just extra hungover or being lazier than usual by pretending half his body was paralyzed. I started laughing and told him he should probably calm down then. I said, "Can't you take a joke?" He kept making incomplete threats and I just couldn't stop laughing, making it even funnier when he wouldn't shut up. Don't feel it, Gary. I love ugly laughing at angry people. I was a hyena. He was fighting the urge to kill me and the desire to not stroke out simultaneously. The struggle was real. It took about 20 minutes more to get to the site, and that dance continued the whole time. I even asked him if that was his normal shade of red. Arriving, he ordered me to get out, said I was fired, and then stomped off to go call the company owner. Whatever. I had intermittent chuckles and smoked cigarettes while savoring my Pyrrhic victory for the 4 hours it took the company owner to come pick me up. It was a medium-sized business, about 100 employees, and he was the GM as well. I got some details. Gary wanted to involve the cops for attempted murder, but the boss dissuaded him. Gary told one hell of a tale that left me looking like Satan, so I told him all about the necessity of Gary's punishment on the way back to the city. He had a good chuckle about it. He was actually a decent guy. I worked for him until I went back to school. I got moved to a different crew where I could be the lone sociopath, but that's about it. I did get some street cred with the rest of the boys at the company. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think OP went too far, or did Gary get exactly what he deserved? To be honest, I don't have any sympathy for bullies, no matter if it's at school or at the workplace. Bullies are just despicable. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. And now we will read the second title story, which starts like this. 4 months after my parents died, I got a call that changed everything. "Hi, we are the buyers. When do you want to schedule the walkthrough?" Turns out my neighbor had been forging federal documents to steal my inheritance while I was grieving, to sell my inherited house behind my back. He thought he would get away with it. And the first one is the title story, which is titled, "Am I the jerk for sending my neighbor to prison after he fraudulently sold the house I inherited from my dead parents?" And wow, that is a crazy title if I've ever heard one. So about 2 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. I was completely devastated. They were my best friends, and losing them both at once was the worst thing that ever happened to me. They left me their house, which was fully paid off and worth about $180,000 in a decent neighborhood. The will was crystal clear, probate went smoothly, and I had all the proper documentation showing that I was the sole heir. Here's where it gets complicated though. I was living across the country at the time, working a job I could not just abandon immediately, and my plan was to finish up my contract, sell my apartment, and move into my parents' house within 6 months. I figured the house would be fine sitting empty for a bit. It's in a safe neighborhood and my parents had good relationships with their neighbors. So enter my neighbor, let's call him Dave. Dave lived next door and had always been friendly with my parents. He's this guy in his early 50s who owns a small construction company and has lived in the neighborhood for like 15 years. When I met him at the funeral, he seemed genuinely sad about my parents' deaths and offered to keep an eye on the house while I got my affairs in order. "Don't worry about anything," he told me. "I'll make sure nobody messes with the place. Your parents were good people." I was grateful, gave him my contact info, telling him I'd be moving in within 6 months. Everything seemed fine for the first couple months. Dave would text me occasionally with updates, "Lawn looked good, no issues," that kind of thing. Then about 4 months after my parents died, I got a call that changed everything. It was from some woman asking when I wanted to schedule the walkthrough for the house sale. I was completely confused. "I'm sorry, what house sale?" I asked. "Well, the house at address. We are the buyers and we are supposed to close next week." My blood went cold. I told her there had to be some mistake here. That was my house and it definitely wasn't for sale. She got really flustered and said she had paid the deposit already and had been working with the owner to finalize everything. The owner? Who exactly have you been working with? He's called Dave. He said he inherited the house from his deceased neighbors. I literally felt sick. I told her to call me back and immediately tried calling Dave, but no answer. I called like 10 times over the next few hours and finally he picked up. "Oh hey," he said, casual as anything. "What's up?" "Dave, I just got a call from someone who thinks they are buying my parents' house." What the hell is going on? There was this long pause, and then he said, "Look, you've been gone for months. The house was just sitting there empty. I figured you didn't really want it since you never moved in. These people made a good offer and I thought we could work something out." I was speechless. Work something out? Dave, that is my house. You cannot just sell someone else's property. "Well," he said, and I will never forget this, "technically the paperwork says I'm the inheritor, so legally it is my house to sell." What paperwork? What are you talking about? "I had some documents drawn up. Don't worry about the details. The point is, these people are good buyers and they are offering $170,000 in cash. That's a fair price. I was thinking we could split it 50-50 since I did all the work of finding buyers and handling the sale." I couldn't believe what I was hearing here. This man was trying to steal my house and then generously offer me half the money like he was doing me a favor. Dave, you need to call those people right now and tell them the sale is off. That house belongs to me and I have all the legal documentation to prove it. I don't think so," he said. "Like I said, the paperwork is all in order. Maybe you should just take the $85K and be grateful. Your parents would have wanted you to be practical about this." That last part made me see red. Bringing up my dead parents like that? I told him he had 24 hours to cancel the sale, or I was calling the cops and a lawyer. He just laughed in my face though. "Good luck with that. Possession is 9/10 of the law and I've got all the documents. Maybe next time don't abandon property if you want to keep it." Then he hung up on me. I immediately started making some calls. First to a lawyer who told me that this was definitely fraud but could take months to sort out through civil court. Then to the police who said it was a civil matter and they couldn't do much unless I had proof of criminal activity. The real estate agent involved here said that they had been working with Dave for weeks and had copies of documents showing that he was really the inheritor. I demanded to see these documents and the lawyer helped me get copies and they were completely fabricated. Someone had created fake probate documents, a fake will, and even fake death certificates for my parents that listed Dave as their son and sole heir. The forgeries were actually pretty good enough to fool a real estate agent and title company apparently. But here's the thing that made this whole situation even more infuriating. Dave had been planning this for months. I found out later that he had started the paperwork process just 6 weeks after my parents died while I was still grieving and planning their memorial service. He had been pretending to be the grieving neighbor looking out for their property while simultaneously working to steal it from under me. The lawyer said we could definitely prove fraud here, but by the time we got through court, the house might already be sold and then we would have to deal with the innocent buyers who thought they were making a legitimate purchase. It could take years to resolve and cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Meanwhile, Dave was telling the whole neighborhood that I was some ungrateful kid trying to steal his inheritance and that my parents had actually left the house to him because I never visited them. This was completely false, by the way. I visited every few months and called them weekly. And yeah guys, so far, let me know in the comments what you would have done with this douchebag Dave. This guy seems like one of the worst people ever if you ask me, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Anyway, here is where I might be the a-hole. Instead of just fighting this through normal legal channels, I decided to get creative. I was absolutely furious and wanted Dave to face real consequences for what he was trying to do. I did some research and found out that what Dave was doing was not just civil fraud, it was criminal fraud involving forged government documents. But I needed to catch him in the act to get the police interested, so I called Dave back and said I'd been thinking about his offer and I told him $85K was not enough, I wanted $100K or I would fight the sale. This was a complete lie, but I wanted to see how far he would go. "I don't know," he said. "That cuts pretty deep into my profit margin." "Your profit margin? Dave, it's my house."
"Not according to the paperwork. But look, I like you. Your parents were good people. How about 95K and we call it even?"
"Fine," I said, "but I want to see all the documentation before we finalize anything." He agreed to meet me to go over everything. What he didn't know was that I'd already contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division, and they were very interested in Dave's forged federal documents. The FBI agent I spoke with explained that forging death certificates and probate documents is a federal crime, especially when used to defraud someone of property worth over $100,000. They asked if I would be willing to wear a wire to get Dave to admit to the forgery on tape, so on a Saturday, I met Dave at a coffee shop wearing an FBI wire. I played the part of the reluctant heir who was starting to come around to his generous offer. I said, "These documents look different from the ones I have."
"Well,"
Dave said, leaning in,
"let's just say I had to get creative with some of the paperwork. The important thing is that the end result is fair for everyone."
"Creative how?"
"Look, your parents' actual will left everything to you, obviously. But they should have left it to me. I was the one who helped them with everything, looked after the property and was basically like family to them. So I just corrected that oversight."
"You mean you forged the documents?"
"I mean, I made sure the right person got what they deserved. The death certificates, the will, the probate documents. I had a guy who owed me a favor take care of all that. Cost me $3,000, but it was worth it to make things right."
He actually seemed proud of himself. He went on to explain how he had researched what documents were needed, found someone to forge them, and had been planning to sell the house and disappear with the money before I could cause any trouble.
"The beauty of it is," he said, "by the time you could prove anything in court, I would be long gone with the cash. Maybe Mexico, maybe somewhere else in the country with a new identity."
I couldn't believe that he was just laying out his entire criminal plan like this, but I kept playing along. "What about the buyers? Don't they deserve to know the truth?"
"What they don't know won't hurt them. They are getting a good house at a fair price. Everyone wins, except maybe you, but honestly, you should have moved faster if you really wanted the place."
The FBI had enough. Sometime later, they arrested Dave at his house. They found the forged documents, evidence of payment to the forger, and Dave's detailed plans for disappearing with the money. Turned out the forger was someone the FBI had been tracking for years, and Dave's case gave them exactly what they needed to bring him down too. During the investigation, Dave kept insisting that he was the rightful owner and that he had done nothing wrong. He demanded that the FBI follow the proper legal procedures and respect his property rights, so they did. Dave followed every single legal procedure to the letter. They got warrants for everything, they interviewed every single person he had ever mentioned the house to, and they traced the money he spent on everything. Dave thought that he was being smart by demanding, "They do everything by the book." But what he didn't realize was that doing everything by the book meant a much more thorough investigation than they might have otherwise done. If he had just kept his mouth shut and cooperated, he might have faced lighter charges, but the federal charges kept piling up. Wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery of federal documents, identity theft, money laundering. It was like a white-collar crime bingo card. But the best part was yet to come. During all of this, Dave was out on bail and apparently thought that he could still somehow salvage the situation. He contacted the original buyers and tried to convince them that the FBI investigation was just a misunderstanding and that they should go ahead with the purchase anyway.
"The government is just trying to steal my property through bureaucratic red tape," he told them. "If you're still interested in buying, we can close the deal and sort out the paperwork issues later."
The buyers, being reasonable people, immediately called the FBI to report this conversation that added witness tampering and obstruction of justice to Dave's charges. Meanwhile, I was working with a civil lawyer to make sure I could recover any money Dave had already stolen from the other properties, and it turned out his construction business was basically a front for his property scams, and he'd been using business accounts to launder the stolen money. The civil case was much easier once the criminal investigation provided all the evidence. We were able to freeze all of Dave's assets and trace exactly where every stolen dollar had gone. The other victims' families joined the lawsuit, and we ended up recovering almost everything he had stolen over the years. Dave's trial was a complete disaster for him. He represented himself because he claimed no lawyer would fight hard enough for his case. His defense strategy seemed to be insisting that he was the real victim and that everyone else was conspiring against him. During his testimony, he actually said,
"These people abandoned their properties and I was just making sure they didn't go to waste. If anything, I should be getting a good neighbor award."
The prosecutor asked him, "So you're saying that forging federal documents and stealing people's inheritances makes you a good neighbor?"
"I was not stealing anything. I was correcting an injustice. These people didn't deserve what they inherited." It took the jury about 2 hours to convict him on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay full restitution to all victims, plus penalties and interest. But the story doesn't end there. After Dave was sentenced, his ex-wife came forward with information that helped the FBI catch the forgery ring he had been using. Turned out Dave was just small potatoes compared to the operation they were running. His cooperation led to arrests of 12 other people involved in a multi-state property fraud scheme. In exchange for the information, Dave got his sentence reduced to 6 years, but here's the thing, he was so arrogant and entitled throughout the whole process that he managed to violate the terms of his plea agreement multiple times. He kept giving interviews to local news stations claiming he was innocent and that the real criminals were the system and the ungrateful heirs who stole his rightful property. Each interview violated his agreement not to discuss the case publicly, so the prosecutors withdrew the deal and he ended up serving the full 8 years anyway. As for me though, I got my house back plus damages. I moved in about a year after all this started and once the legal issues were sorted out. And yes, the house needed some work since Dave had apparently been showing it to potential buyers and letting them walk through whenever they wanted, but it was still my parents' house and it was still home. The whole neighborhood apologized once they learned the truth. Apparently, Dave had been going around telling everyone that I was trying to scam him out of his inheritance and that my parents had secretly hated me. A few neighbors even said they had thought something seemed off about his story but hadn't wanted to get involved. Dave's construction business obviously went under, his ex-wife ended up with whatever assets were not seized, which was not much, and his kids who were adults completely cut contact with him. I actually ran into his daughter at the grocery store a few months after the trial, and she apologized for her father's behavior. "We always knew he was kind of shady," she said, "but we never thought he would do something like this. The house is worth about $220,000 now, so I actually came out ahead financially. But more importantly, I feel like justice was served. Dave thought he could take advantage of someone who was grieving and was vulnerable, and instead he ended up losing everything. The other victims' families were able to recover their stolen inheritances too." One of them was an elderly woman whose son's house Dave had sold while she was in the hospital recovering from surgery. She used the restitution money to move closer to her daughter. "I still live in the house, by the way. It's been weird living next door to Dave's old place, which has been empty since his arrest. His ex-wife finally sold it last month to a nice young couple with kids. They don't know the whole story yet, but they seem like good people. Sometimes I think about whether I went too far, though. Dave was definitely a criminal who deserved to be punished, but 8 years in federal prison is a long time. His life is basically over, he's in his 50s, he will have a felony record and he's lost his business, his family, and all his assets. But then I remember how he tried to steal my parents' house while I was still grieving their death, how he forged documents and lied to an entire neighborhood about who I was. How he had done this to other families before and would have kept doing it if he hadn't stopped. The prosecutor told me that property fraud against heirs is actually pretty common, especially when the heir lives far away or there's a delay in settling the estate. People like Dave count on victims being too overwhelmed or poor to fight back effectively, so I guess my question is, was I wrong to go as far as I did? I could have just fought this through civil court and probably would have gotten my house back eventually. Part of me wonders if I was just being vindictive and wanted revenge more than justice. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for sending my neighbor to prison instead of just trying to resolve this civilly? And yeah guys, I would say OP is definitely not an a-hole, he's more like a hero. There's no way anyone would call this guy an a-hole. Either way, let me know in the comments whether you agree or whether you maybe think that OP really was the a-hole, but you better defend yourself for that. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. This was not some misunderstanding or gray area situation. Dave committed multiple felonies and had done this to other families before. You did not send him to prison, his own actions did that. By the way, the FBI doesn't arrest people based on hurt feelings, they arrest them based on evidence of serious crimes. Comment number 2, as someone who works with bereaved families, NTA times 1,000. What Dave did was predatory in the worst way possible. He targeted people during the most vulnerable time of their lives and stole from them while pretending to be helpful. The fact that he had done this before shows this was not a one-time lapse in judgment, it was his business model. You probably saved other families from going through what you went through. Comment number 3, everyone sucks here, but hear me out. Dave is obviously a massive a-hole for what he did, but OP, you went into this wanting revenge, not justice. You could have turned over the evidence to the FBI without wearing a wire and playing games. The result would have been the same. Dave would have been arrested and prosecuted, but you chose to actively participate in taking him down instead of just letting the legal system handle it.
I'm not saying Dave didn't deserve what he got, I'm saying your motivations were not purely about justice and protecting other people, you wanted to see him burn. Comment number 4, you're the a-hole, and I cannot believe everyone is praising you for this. Look, what Dave did was wrong, obviously. But you literally went out of your way to destroy this man's entire life when you could have just gotten your house back through civil court. You said yourself that your lawyer told you the fraud could be proven, so why did you need to play FBI agent and ruin him completely? 8 years in federal prison? Are you kidding me? That's longer than some people get for violent crimes. You took a civil property dispute and turned it into a federal case because you wanted revenge, not justice. Honest about what really happened here. Dave was your parents' neighbor for 15 years. He was trying to look after the property when you abandoned it for months. And yeah, he went about it the wrong way, but maybe since he genuinely thought you didn't want the house since you never bothered to move in or even visit it. You could have just shown up with your paperwork, proven ownership, and gotten your house back, but instead you chose to wear a wire like some kind of vigilante and trick him into confessing so you could send him to prison. That is not justice, that is vindictive. You wanted to see him suffer, and now his life is completely destroyed. Deservedly so, I would say. His business is gone, his family won't talk to him, and he's gonna be a 60-year-old felon when he gets out. All because of a property dispute that could have been handled civilly. Everyone's saying that he deserved it and that he was a predator. Come on, he was a desperate middle-aged guy who made some really bad decisions. He didn't deserve to have his entire existence obliterated because you wanted revenge for him trying to sell your house. You are the a-hole for going nuclear when you didn't have to. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this unhinged comment in the comments. The next one is another Am I the A-hole story, and it is titled Am I the A-hole for filing a police report on a good friend who was caught on video stealing my boyfriend's camera at a dinner. She has refused to help me either replace it in full or contribute to the cost of replacing it. More context, we were out to dinner one night at an expensive hotel. My boyfriend let me borrow his Canon G7X 1800 camera to bring to take pictures with my friends. At the conclusion of the dinner, I went out to the room and realized the camera was gone. I went back right down to the table and no one had seen it. I immediately got with hotel security and she is on video clear as day, swiping the camera when my back was turned and shoving it in her purse. I covered for her initially with my friend and contacted her to find a resolution. She had taken the camera with her and my other friends to a club after dinner, which I didn't attend, and lost it there. For background, this is my good college friend who I know well, the camera thief. She has been taken on free trips to Coachella and St. Barth on my dime, not kidding, as well as many other things. We have done a lot together and are good friends, so I expected her to feel sorry. Initially she lied, saying she didn't have it. When I told her we had video, she confessed and then said yes, she took it, but lost it at the next bar she went to with my other friends. It is now gone. I asked her to help me replace it by going in on me with the cost. And well, she has refused all measured or resolutions, and now I feel like I have nothing left to do but file a police report and let them handle it. It's impacting my relationship and I'm furious that my friend is not helping at all. Why should I be on the hook for something she stole? I've given her 3 weeks to help me resolve this, but she insists that she's gonna do nothing. I'm being pressed by my boyfriend to either replace the camera or help him file a report with her info and the footage. I even asked her to just throw in half or less than half the cost to help, but she still refuses. I don't want her to get in trouble, but I'm at the point where I feel she really doesn't care. Commenter number 1, you are the a-hole. Is there a reason you are choosing your thieving friend over your boyfriend? She's made it clear she's not your friend and she's not gonna make this right. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Who is the a-hole here? The police report should have been filed the moment she said she was not gonna pay for it. If I were your boyfriend, I would be reconsidering the relationship with you over this. You're really dragging your feet to make this right. Get the report made and replace his camera. Commenter number 2, you're the a-hole. Not even sure why you are asking. I've rarely seen a post with more a-hole-ish behavior on here. You're an a-hole to your boyfriend. Kind guy trusted you with something valuable and you're not even giving him all info you have after it got swiped. You brought your a-hole friend to his dinner. You're an a-hole for not filing a report and you're an a-hole to yourself for not holding this friend accountable. What the hell do you mean by throwing in half? Get your head out of your rear and go file a report. Also make sure your BF is made whole, be utterly embarrassed with your own behavior here and do better next time. Comment number 3, genuine question, are you a particularly insecure person? Don't mean that as an insult actually, asking because that's the only way I could see someone trying to make amends with this friend. She's not your friend, she's using and taking advantage of you, and it sounds like she's been doing this for a long time. There are better people out there. You need to start respecting and treating yourself better, otherwise your willingness to go out on a limb for the wrong people will jeopardize your relationships with the right people. I'm sure you can see how this can quickly turn into a self-destructive cycle. Report her to the police and cut her out of your life. And if you're not already, I would talk to a therapist to better understand why you feel so compelled to protect this relationship. Soft YTA to yourself and your boyfriend. Update to the story: I sent her a text this AM telling her if I don't receive the full cost of the camera or shipping confirmation of a new camera from an approved vendor to a provided address by end of day Friday, we'll be filing a report with the police Saturday AM. I felt like an a-hole typing this out to her, but I have to do it. Update number 2, she told me she is sick of me and that I'll be receiving a tracking number by 12 Eastern on Friday and not blame her if the package is never received. I told her if she was my real friend, she would be sorry, and in no way will I allow this to be flipped on me. Should I ask if the camera is new or the one that disappeared? Update X3, she sent me a tracking number via FedEx. It says it's awaiting package. I've asked her repeatedly if she is sending me the original camera, assuming it magically turned up or a new one. She refuses to answer and only tells me to stop bothering her. Update number 4, original camera returned via FedEx the other day has been given back to the boyfriend. However, the camera thief blocked me on all social media after this, appeared that she was trying to keep the camera for herself and expected me to just buy a new one for boyfriend. And the next one is a petty revenge story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, Father-in-law punched me below the belt, so I bricked his Switch. So to start off, I actually have a great relationship with my father-in-law. We have a lot of the same hobbies, actively hang out, and he knows that I was the one to do this to him, and he found it hilarious. So the situation happened back in December of 2021, me being with my wife's family for the holidays and quickly them getting all drunk. Since I'm usually the DD, I did not drink since I was gonna have to drive out the middle of Philly, but as the night went on I was playfully joking around with my wife and her sister, arguing something stupid like the best thing to do in a game, and honestly just rage baiting my wife like a good husband. Her father, completely drunk, came over and laughed as I rage baited her and told her, "Here's how you deal with your husband," and punched me in the dick. Obviously he didn't punch me full force, but I'm sure most guys here know even a light hit can be enough to make you kneel over. As the night went on, he even apologized and offered me to punch him back, but I said no, I was obviously gonna get him back. 1 month later, Pokemon Legends Arceus came out and me and her entire family got it. Father-in-law also getting it and loving the game, but I beat the game much faster than all of them, and having hunted shiny Pokemon for years carried some of them over, my favorite bring a shiny Giratina I had. Amazingly, before it became public knowledge as far as I knew, I figured out that if I specifically had a shiny Giratina and used Shadow Sneak with it, it would just crash your whole Switch console and force you to have to fully shut it down and restart the device. Cue my petty revenge. A little while later, we are all hanging out at sister-in-law's house playing Pokemon, and I nonchalantly offered all of them various shiny Pokemon that I hunted throughout the years, claiming I had a lot. I didn't, but didn't want him being too suspicious knowing her tastes. I knew immediately he would love to have a shiny Giratina, so I traded it to him and just waited long enough that I kind of forgot. Then months later, when we were all hanging out, he was complaining that his Switch kept crashing. He had to restart it, uninstalled and reinstalled all of his games, but it just kept crashing when he was playing the game Pokemon Arceus, and no matter what he did with it, it wouldn't work. So I asked him, "Oh, is it whenever you used Shadow Sneak with that Giratina I gave you?" He went silent, and then I immediately followed up with, "That's for punching me in the cucumber in December." He couldn't stop laughing as he said in his own words, "Oh my god, I wasted real time on that. I respect the long con." It was even funnier when a few days later Artisalis started popping up for him about that glitch in Arceus well after he found out from me. Everyone in the family agreed it was pretty damn funny. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow, and don't forget to like the video.